G'day guys, it's Mitchell again from Australasian SXS. We are here doing another test. This time it is with the Polaris Xpedition. This is the 1000cc version and the 4-seat. It's a new model for Polaris. It's come into Australia this year, and it's kind of like a, I guess you'd call it general, but with a bit more work, a slightly different specification. That's kind of where I would sit it in a specs panel, but it's loaded with features. This is kind of the vehicle with all the fruit on it. But our plan is, we obviously run a cattle farm here, so we do have a bit of play, so we're going to predominantly use it as a work vehicle, but also use it for having some fun with the family as well when we can. So first up, we'll do a test on how it handles as its design brief, and then we're going to do a second video on how it goes for work. So the Xpedition is an all-new vehicle for Polaris, so before we get straight into reviewing what it's like to drive, I thought we'd go through what it's kind of made up in brief detail. So we'll start with the performance and handling. The Xpedition is equipped with electronic fuel injection and an automatic PVT transmission with multiple drive modes. So you've got Sport, Standard and Comfort. And it's also got the typical Polaris on-demand true all-wheel drive, two-wheel drive VersaTrack turf mode as well. It runs high in suspension, so it features the Fox shocks, and the Fox gear is significantly better than the suspension in the Ranger and General, the 4-seat models. So if we're talking about dimensions and practicality of the Xpedition, if you're hopping out of a Ranger and into the Xpedition certainly feels bigger. It has an overall size of 387 centimetres long, 162 centimetres wide and 190 centimetres high, with a wheelbase of 297 centimetres. It runs 35.6 centimetres of ground clearance, which is also more than the General and the Ranger, while it has a water fording height of 71.5 centimetres. So that's handy for all of you out there who are going to be spending time crossing quite deep rivers. Looking at the safety and utility aspect of the Xpedition, it has 4-wheel hydraulic disc brakes and LED headlights and tail lights, and it has a park-in-transmission parking brake, which adds just that extra layer of safety when you're on inclines, knowing that you don't just have a handbrake to hold the vehicle in place. The vehicle actually has quite a spacious rear dumping box for a recreational machine. It has a carrying capacity of 272 kilos, which is the same as the General, despite on physical appearance it looking much bigger than the General we've tested in the past. That is a fair way off the Ranger, which has a carrying capacity of 453 kilos in the tub. Looking at the technology and the conveniences of the Polaris Xpedition, it has a 4-inch colour display that sits in front of the driver and a centre dash 7-inch touchscreen display that has ride command technology. So the Xpedition offers access to things like navigation, trail maps and vehicle diagnostics, among other things. It's got excellent electronic power steering, and it runs the JBL Trail Pro 4100 audio system to pump out your tunes, which you can do via Bluetooth, or you can actually plug your phone in to the USB outlet. Looking at all those design and comfort bits, the Xpedition has a front bull bumper and a Pro-Fit Sports roof, which is quite sturdy. The interior features bolstered bucket seats with driver and passenger seat sliders for those with long legs, which I found quite handy. And the rear flip-up bench seat means that you can fit 5 people comfortably. I'm 190 centimetres tall, and I could comfortably fit behind the 2 front seats and without my knees touching them. But it also folds flat, so you have even more room for carrying capacity in the back if you only have 2 passengers. That kind of thing works well for a work angle, which we'll get into in a later test. So that's pretty much the nuts and the bolts of the Xpedition. It has loads more technology and other bits and pieces than that, including a bolstered frame that's incredibly sturdy and well supported. But if you want all the details, you can read about them in our specs panel on the australasiansxs.com.au website. So for now, we're going to get into how it rides. So when we picked up the Xpedition, we were blown away just at how big and chunky it looked. The 27-inch rims with Pro Armor tyres look tough and give the Xpedition even more clearance. Opening the doors, and they feel incredibly solid. They open like a conventional car door, unlike the Ranger doors that open facing forward. It just means when you're getting out to get a forest gate, you've got to hop out and go around the door to get it. When you hop in the bucket seat, it feels like you're jumping in a comfortable race car. They're more comfortable than the Razor seats, but they do take a little more pulling to get out of when opening forest gates or farm gates than the Ranger bench seat. I thought the driving position was far more sporty than I thought it would be. The steering wheel, seat height and armrests are all designed to hold you snug and in one place, and they do a really good job of that. And they're well spaced so that you're comfortable with your arm on the armrest while holding the steering wheel, and there's not much sliding around in the seat when you get up it around some of the trails. The Xpedition has plenty of grab handles for the passenger, although we'd love it to have a grab handle that sits kind of in front of the driver and the passenger seat on the frame rail that runs down, simply to pull yourself out of the seat and get out of the vehicle just that little bit easier. But it does have quite a handy big bar across the back seat, which enables passengers, once they're clipped in with the seat belt, to then also hold onto the huge bar in front of them for when you really decide to get a bit racy. So turn the key in this motor and it roars into life. So this is actually the ProStar 1000 Generation 2 motor, as opposed to the Ranger, which runs the Generation 1 motor. Now on paper, the Generation 2 motor has 114 horsepower, which is 14 more horsepower than the Generation 1. When you take off with the gearbox in high and the mapping in sport mode, you're in for a surprise. It accelerates incredibly fast. The three modes are changeable by a button on the dash, so they don't change the power overall, they just change the response. And in sport, the throttle is super sensitive. That was excellent for ripping through the trails when your passengers were ready for it, but at slow speeds, when just trying to cruise, it is actually too responsive. So we actually ended up using the standard mapping when we were just exploring trails and we wanted a more comfortable ride. That extra 14 horsepower difference is noticeable compared to the General, most notably in the bottom end. Because the Xpedition is not based off the Razor platform, the motor signs off a little earlier, but it's designed to have more torque. I was still able to get the Xpedition up over 80 kilometers an hour without it feeling like it was moving around too much, but it did sign off once you got any faster than that in the top of the revs. One thing that took a little getting used to, hopping out of a Ranger, was the minimal engine braking in the Xpedition. So the Xpedition runs a similar system that's seen in the Razor, and also that is seen in the General. So once the revs get below a certain threshold, the primary clutch opens and releases the belt. It's not uncommon and it's in many side-by-sides. So this is great for flying around the trails because it makes a smoother ride. You can roll on more, and when you're on and off the throttle, there's just a little less jerkiness than some of the Ranger models. But when trying to go slow down hills, the Xpedition will roll on a bit if the revs get too low. So I just have to remember to keep a little throttle on and my other foot over the brake, just so that clutch didn't release and it would continue to engine brake down steep hills. But believe it or not, the size and motor aren't the best features on the Xpedition. The Fox shocks are. The ride comfort on the Xpedition is exceptional. The Fox 2.0 Podium QS3 shocks up the front and Fox 2.5 Podium shocks out the back are so good at absorbing small and big bumps, you don't even need to slow down for anything. Wombat holes, no problem. Gutters, I didn't even notice them, and erosion on the road, I couldn't even tell it was there. I was blown away at how well Polaris have done to make the Xpedition comfortable at slow speed and high speed over small and large holes and bumps. I never felt like the Xpedition was going to tip, and while I noticed the wheelbase length is quite long, especially when turning around or going over large bumps, I've never felt so planted in a vehicle before. Even on off-camber hills, the Xpedition's geometry and the Fox shocks never made me feel uneasy. So the ride comfort is the highlight and the ground clearance is massive. It just adds that extra layer of reassurance knowing that I'm not going to get hung up on every rock or log when I'm smashing through thick forest undergrowth. The Xpedition driving experience is very impressive, and I'm actually yet to pilot a side-by-side that's as comfortable and feels as safe as the Xpedition, which I know is a huge call, but really, I was incredibly comfortable going at speed with my family in this vehicle. So many of you out there are probably asking, well, who's it for? We don't have all that much trail riding and recreational riding in Australia. It's got a super torquey, responsive engine with incredible suspension and loads of high-end features. So it's an excellent choice for rec users who want to go out there and have lots of fun with the family. They want every feature that they can possibly get for maximum comfort, but then they also want to use the Xpedition to do a little bit of work. And I'll get to that work aspect of the Xpedition in a future video. One of the other cool things we liked about the Xpedition is that it is more customizable than any other side-by-side. So you can bolt on a rooftop tent or a kayak or a mountain bike rack. You can tow a boat or dirt bikes with its 907 kilo tow rating and even drag it out of a hole with the 2-ton winch that comes standard on the front. Now, I know $52,495 driving away is a lot of money, and it seems like an expensive piece of kit, but I challenge you to try and find any other vehicle that comes standard in the same spec that the Xpedition does that's less than double the price. It's got so many features and it is an excellent recreational vehicle that I would highly recommend it for families with the land and with access to go exploring for days on end. So we're going to be back next month with the Polaris Xpedition, but using it purely for work. We want to see how well it goes at working. If you were going to buy a vehicle that you can play with and do a significant amount of work, we're going to fold those back seats flat, we're going to move some cattle around, we're going to see how much we can tow. Everything that we do normally on the farm with our Ranger, we're going to do with this Xpedition, and we're going to tell you how it goes. So stay tuned, we'll be back in a month's time.